All right, my name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Stacey Gibson and Neil Thompson. We're at Park Avenue Fine Wines in Portland. It's January 20th, 2021. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rich.
First question for both of you, and whoever wants to start can start, is why wine?
Why wine? I'll start.
Go for it.
Sure. Wine for me came from my background of being raised in the South of America, Southeast, Southern Baptist, and not drinking at all. And so for me, I missed the college party days and all that, which I made up for later. And I went right to great food. I'm addicted to food, and I started saying that way before I was old enough to drink. And then food and travel led me very naturally. I think a lot of people, this will resonate with a lot of people. It just led me to adult beverages and appreciating them. And it started, I remember the moment when I just stopped describing Guinness as bitter and described it as smooth and realized how could that happen. And that from then on, Guinness was my first taste of beer. And then next thing you know, I was trying so hard to learn about wine. And I went through, this is the early to mid 90s, and it was all about Rosemount Shiraz, and then like the Perrin Brothers Côte d'Aron, and we all learned, and then Bogle Petit Syrah, and next thing you know, found out about more elegant wines, and just really got into wine full force from there, and made a career of it pretty quickly after that. That was, I can give more detail, but that was the story, and then we'll get to it. But the Oregon wine came quickly after that for me. It was that simple for me, in my 20s.
Mine was a little bit more roundabout. I studied political science in college, and so after I graduated, I went to DC, and I was not happy there. But so I moved to New York City, and I was more in like a what am I going to do now kind of situation. And I was sort of trying all different things, working in restaurants, and I kind of worked into it through that. I was just absolutely enamored with it. And I like that for me, a lot of the attraction is, especially coming from political science, I love the cultural aspect of it, the international aspect, just how it all comes together. It kept appealing to me more than just I like drinking it too, but I love that it was just this like, I guess like holistic kind of industry that brings so much together. And so I'm definitely very outgoing, and so being on the floor of a restaurant and talking to people about it, and then having the also interpersonal relationships that you build through it, that was like something I just absolutely loved. And but also I think the sensory experience, my husband is a chef, and I think for us just this coming together of like just appreciating food and wine and aromas and all these and flavors is something I just like absolutely fell in love with.
I like the way she said it better. I just always say the romance of wine, but that was awesome.
So Neil, back to you then for a second. Once wine became something you're interested in and you kind of developed this passion for it, tell me about the process of educating yourself and making it into a career.
Well, mine was unique, and I don't know, I think it was unique in that almost everyone I know now did some sort of level of WSET or Somelier Guild or something to help them as if a college course, or literally a college course. And I missed all that, and I don't know which one is the better way, but for me, scholastically wouldn't have worked. I can be quoted as saying, if it was all about me having to flashcard learn the elevation of a slope in Chile in Maipo Valley, I would not be interested in wine. I'm not a good student, but I am very passionate. And so for me, it literally just went into, how did I get the original question again?
Basically, how did you educate yourself and turn it into a career?
I said that I'm thankful to people. And I'm going to name a couple names, and I know they wouldn't mind at all. John Sherwood took me under his wing when I was working my third job, 1995. I had a third job part-time at a little convenience store in a wealthy neighborhood in Charlotte, Myers Park. Shout out to the Laurel Market. And they had a wine section, and because I was the nerd who was reading wine magazines during the day at my other job, they were like, well, Neil, why don't you take over this wine department, wine and beer? And so I went full into it, and I had one rep who would wait at the end of his day for me in between customers. He'd wait and wait and wait for an hour at least and taste me and force me to blind taste the wines in his bag. And a little while later, he said, I'm moving to Boston and I think you should take my job at the Dreyfus Ashby distributor at the time. And they're still in business today. It's Grapevine Distributors in North Carolina, and they are the Oregon wine mecca. It's like they carry the great Oregon wine book there. And I got full throttle. He said, here's what you need to do. They're going to test you. Read Kevin Israeli's book, The Windows on the World Wine book. And it wasn't even in color back then. It was just this like beige and brown book. And this is the only wine book I've ever really read. I'm actually not proud of that. I'm not like, look at this, anyone can do it. It's only cover to cover book I've read. I own a lot of good books though, and reference them. But I read it and I tested and passed with flying colors and had a couple interviews and got hired, and then I just got thrown headfirst into Burgundy and Oregon, mainly hardcore, and I had to sink or swim. And so I just learned through listening to people, meeting people, and meeting people with more experience who really took me under their wing. And we can get to this later, but that's how I ended up in Oregon too, but I'm sure we'll get to that. But it was all about great people in my life, and I think my passion for it kind of helped some of the old school guys and gals take me under their wing. And that's my answer. And then I just eat and drink and travel. That's all I do, so.
Whatever for you, Stacey, but tell me about turning into a career.
Yeah, I had a much more structured education into wine because I was trying to figure out what I was going to do when I was living in New York City. And so I did take some classes at ICE and at WSET classes. And from there, kind of, I want to tell the short version. I feel like there's a lot you cut out, but I used those to kind of squirrel my way to get promoted at jobs. When I was at Momofuku, I was like a cellar rat, and I just was begging for more responsibility, and eventually they gave it to me, which was great. But I really took my education really further when from there I went to work at Cork Buzz with Laura Manick, who's an MS, who is just an amazing woman and amazing teacher, amazing businesswoman as well. And she really puts a lot of work into educating her employees, like intensely, and it's really amazing. And so we would blind taste during pre-service. She really supported us in taking the quartermaster test. So I started working for her, and back then, this was in 2013, it was a little easier to kind of move through. So within a year, I took intro certified and then advanced as well. So, but she really mentored me to take the advanced. So I'm much more so I do love to travel, but I'm more of a book person. I love to read, and I like me some flashcards too.
She's the best student I've ever met. She's crazy. She's inspirational. Exhausting. She's good.
And I mean, of course, travel has a lot to do with that though too. Like the first like major wine region, besides like Long Island or the Finger Lakes, that I ever traveled to was Burgundy in 2010 when I was first starting out, before I even when I worked at Cork Buzz. And so just really like digging into that. And mentors are just absolutely instrumental with that too. Laura, when I worked at Momofuku, I worked under Teresa Pau, who's now in Boston, and she's amazing. And then people like Bernie Sun, who he got us all of our appointments in Burgundy, which could not have done on my own. So I mean, yeah, help people. There's only so much you can read in a book, and especially when it comes to tasting and when it comes to understanding wine beyond the facts, you really have to like hear other people's experiences. And so I was very lucky to be in a really rich sommelier community in New York City, for sure.
So I'm curious about the actual the learning to taste, learning wines by taste, and tell me about the process of that for each of you in terms of building your palate and building your education that way, and discovering what it was you liked and wanted to learn more about.
I guess I'll go first again. Keep it rolling. It's going to follow perfectly in line with what I was just saying. I just kept getting thrown into things, and so I just found myself there, which worked out beautifully. So in North Carolina, we did a lot of tastings at the company, and I would hang out at restaurants after my shift, and people would let me taste things. But it really started in 2000 when I moved here in early 2000. when I immediately, I had landed a job and moved out here to sell the Kermit Lynch book and at a now defunct distributor. But they had the whole Kermit Lynch portfolio. It was not split up at the time. It was everything, Italy, France. And I was very, very lucky to immediately get ushered into, Bedford International took me to Italy in '01, all over Italy. And then Kermit Lynch got to go on the buying trip in January 2002. And I just kept finding that entree to get in there. And then I just literally stood in cellars learning how to spit and not look like an idiot, and how to freeze and not look like a total wuss, and that was it. I just kept doing it over and over. And then I had, I'm probably jumping ahead a bit, but my last job I had before we opened this place was a great job at another wine shop for 11 years, where I just was lucky enough to hang out with this old guard of people who would come in every Saturday night and open every 64 Barolo you've ever read about, every Burgundy, every Bordeaux, every vintage that we all just dream about. I was very, very lucky and blessed and happy to meet these characters who am still very good friends with, those who are still with us, and then and just taste these great wines. And they were so generous, and they loved that all of us younger, and even younger than me, some of the employees there were so passionate, and we'd hang out after work and get to taste. So learned how to taste, listen to people talking, and it was nice that they were rarely industry people. So we didn't use too much industry speak. We would just say what we felt about a wine, emotionally or physically, and that just helped. My mind always grabs onto something and it goes crazy. So it just helped me create my own vocabulary and learn how to taste with other people, and it was great. That's pretty much it. Again, I didn't have that was it.
I was very much involved in tasting groups, and especially because I was really following the Court of Master Sommelier's track. We were really following the grid as I learned. So as I mentioned, when I worked at, I always had tasting groups even before that they would change as I got more advanced, and I can kind of think about some friends who actually are really, my friend Chris Rafferty and I, he now runs the program at Gramercy Tavern, and we had this me, him, and another friend of ours, Laura, we would just taste wine, and it was so adorable to look back at it now, because we would just kind of be in the apartment just being like, so what are you getting, and then
It's
fast
adorable.
forward, it's adorable, it really is. But then from there, we really, especially once I started working towards the court, doing the grid, meeting weekly, we would be, it was quite rigorous, and we would time it, do it like we were all business, which I appreciated, maybe just for my personality. I just think that it really helped me to really, it was just that kind of discipline. I really enjoyed it, and I'm finding when you're comparing wines and you have things right next to each other and you're really saying is this really high acid, is this really low acid, and calibrating your own palate and really understanding that. For me, that was really helpful. And I think it's definitely helped me. It really helped me grasp the world of wine too. At first, when I was getting into wine, it was, especially with tasting, it feels chaotic. It feels like, how are you ever going to tell the difference between, or when there is, it is funny, we taste so differently, and he's much more this tastes like this one cereal I had this one day when I was 5 years old, and I'm like this, and I kind of really bring my own arsenal of tasting notes that I don't think there's one over the other, but that's definitely where I come from. And then I think I'm more well, this is kind of medium plus tannin. This isn't high tannin at all.
She's usually right. Yesterday you're like, botrytis. I was like, why didn't I say botrytis? How did I not get that? It's obvious.
So, but then that kind of goes hand in hand with having access to, it's very hard. And I know when you're young in the industry, it's really tough, but having access to people opening really nice wines, which I did have in New York. And when I moved to Oregon, it's a different community. I didn't have that as much until kind of working here, but it's someone opening, just having a customer open a 64 Barolo and you get to taste it when you open it. You have to do that, and it's really tough.
It's the game changer.
It is, yeah.
Again, I'm incredibly lucky. I don't know how I just was in the right place at the right time for that, because I can't do that.
Yeah.
And I should have mentioned I do have a monthly wine tasting group when it's not pandemic, and we open great wines too. So that's another opportunity, is a monthly wine group with a theme. I'd like to address the grid for a minute. So I'm 50, so I'm allowed to be a little bit curmudgeonly.
Curmudgeon away.
But this is what's interesting to me, Rich, is that I find, so again, I would be horrible if I had to be a student about it. So I like to kind of pick fun some. And a lot of our friends who are incredible sommeliers in this town, I mean, like really making a name for themselves, and they're the new generation, and I think it's awesome. But they'll come, we'll let them gather here and do tasting groups because we have space for that, obviously. And so I can hear like medium, they'll split off into little groups, and I'll hear like clarity, medium plus, and this and that. And so all sarcasm aside, my personal problem with that idea, and someone learning for the first time, like I just got into wine 6 months ago and I'm learning about clarity plus or the minus or whatever, the things with the clarities. My problem is, it's so funny how a year ago, clarity seemed to be being graded as, everyone's gonna say, that's not what we're doing, as like a plus or a minus, a good or a bad. But then those same younger people seem to now be into the cloudiest of all wines, the unfiltered, the orange wines, and now those are cool. But a year ago, those would have been deemed unworthy of consuming. So I wonder, and I mean this sincerely, if they're maybe missing, I wish everyone could I wish we could do like a Vulcan mind read where I could like show them the thing that happened to me and experientially, and just letting things happen, where 1999 La Pierre Morgon had Brett in it, but we used to call it terroir, and now people get mad if you say that. And it isn't terroir, but it was a part of that tradition at that time, so therefore the terroir at that time, in my opinion. And so I wish people could have a little of both and just experience from an emotional standpoint and get to know how something was made and be like, well, that is what it is, and maybe I don't like it, but understanding. And that's where I hope that wine students getting into it now will allow themselves to not feel like, well, the crowd's gonna say I'm dumb if I like this wine. And so that's my only fear with like stark, like this is the only way, is these charts and things. And I hope everyone doesn't do that. I probably totally missed the mark, and they'll be like, that's not what we're doing. But I won't listen to them.
It's not the only thing. And I think that then it's each person's personality. Like some people can take the grid too seriously. And we've all known sommeliers who are like out to dinner, who are like, and you're just like, it's time to cool that, you know,
like 2 a.m. at a party, has anyone revisited this Shannon?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, just stop. There's a dance party in the living room, stop.
Just do the dance party. Yeah. So I do think that there is, I mean, I think anyone who does the grid is gonna have fun later too. Not anyone though. I think then that's just a personality thing.
Yeah.
But a little bit of both. You can't be too serious all the time. Because I know a lot of sommeliers, a lot of masters and advanced people who are like die hard to the grid, and like you get them out to dinner and they're having fun. They're enjoying it.
Yeah, that's the best.
Yeah.
I was just gonna let you guys go for a while. I don't need to ask any more questions. Let's just point, counterpoint.
Well, the kids these days.
I know I'm gonna come off like that.
So, Neil, you mentioned earlier that Oregon wine, because you were kind of thrown into it early, you were attracted to it immediately. So tell me about some of your early kind of Oregon wine experiences, what you had and what kind of spoke to you about it, and then about coming to Oregon and sort of discovering it for yourself.
Sure. So it could be a long version, but it doesn't need to be. So I'll kind of chop into things, and that is that because I got thrown into Burgundy from a Dreyfus Ashby house, so mostly Drouhin, whose style to this day I really respect. I like how Drouhin, I know they're a huge producer and everyone, oh, they're so big and corporate, but A, they're fully biodynamic, so put that in your pipe and smoke it. And B, they were before any of the cool kids were talking about it either. So, and their wines are beautiful. They're real pretty. So I think of their Vosne Romanée or their Amoureuse, which none of us can afford anymore, but that's how it goes. They're so pretty. And then while I was crash coursing on that wine, and the whites as well, then all of a sudden I was tasting Amity 1986. And And even some of the lesser vintages like 87, but those are the ones I was selling from Oregon, like Elk Cove, before Adam. I think Adam was just starting to take over, but his father was making them. And those were these Burgundian seeming wines that made me think, how is this happening? Because I had only had delicious California Pinots, but they were just that other style. Even, Russian River and Sonoma, they were just a little bigger and fruitier, which is delicious too. But I was like, something's up in Oregon. And so I planned a trip to visit my producers, and I came out, and next thing I knew, some of the old school names like Craig Hedstrom and Doyle Hinman and those guys, they all super took me under their wing. They had mostly done visits with me to my accounts in North Carolina, and they said, when you come out, let me take you around, and they did. And all the old Lima crew and everyone. And next thing I knew, I came out here to visit, and by the time I left my visit here, I had arranged a home to live in, a job, and loaded a moving truck and moved out here. It was crazy. And so that was so I was already selling the Oregon wines, fell in love with them. I knew they were pretty and aromatic and understated, and I knew people like Myron Redford wore like cut off jeans and swam in his homemade pool at his trailer, and I was like, I need to live there. So that is exactly why I came out here. And I said, so I went home and I said, I'm moving to Portland, and people said, well, have you been? I said, well, I just visited, but that's it. I'm literally moving there right now. And everyone's like, what are you doing? So I came out and moved up on Pill Hill and took a job with Vintage House at the time. And started selling. They also had quite a bit of Oregon wine too, and they were more so the California Zen and Kermit Lynch House. That was like the main things, but also Oregon wine. And so I started. And then my next chapter would be that because I sold Kermit Lynch, all great winemakers in the valley drink French wine. That's like a thing. So they had me unloading my trunk full, my little Nissan Sentra trunk full of Kermit Lynch wines to them for personal consumption on the regular. Michael Beakley, thanks for paying my rent. And he was at Druin at the time. That was fun. So that was how I just was like drinking, selling, hanging out with all the crew at Dundee Bistro back then. We all just hung out drinking great wines, and they were also like one shiny nickel back then, so we could. And I just had one copper penny. I brought it up a notch.
Oh my God, that's inflation.
But that was, and this is so much fun. Thinking back, like it was, Dundee Bistro was, Tom Sikta, who is really important in our industry now, and then after him, Tony Williams, they were the managers of the Dundee wine tasting, the Ponzi wine tasting bar, and I got to know them, and we tasted together, Tom first, and then Tony. And then after Anthony Filberti left to open his amazing Ant Hill Winery in California, is the buyer at Dundee Bistro, Erica Landon came in. And we became fast friends and loved tasting Burgundy and talking about white Burgundy together. And now look what she's doing. I mean, she and Ken are making some of the most Oregon/Burgundy influenced Oregon Chardonnays out there. So that was my crew, and then that's how I just kept staying in love with Oregon wine. Even though we were tasting a lot of French wine and other wines, we were mixing it up with our brands we worked for and just having a great time. And to this day, we love and respect or they make the best Oregon wines. That's the short version. Believe it or not.
I know, I'm like, what was the question? Is why Oregon? Is that the...
Yeah. So Stacey, I'm curious with you. What brought you to Oregon, and what were your kind of initial impressions of Oregon wine? When did you first have it, and what did you kind of think of it?
I think one of the first ones that I can remember is Big Table Farm when I was working at Momofuku. I didn't get to meet Claire at the time, but I know she had been there for a buying trip, and I didn't have any context. But my corporate beverage director had bought some for her location, and so I was like, oh, this is cool. So she's like, I committed you to some, you don't have to take it, and I was like, I'll take it. And I was blown away by the Pinot. And so that was kind of my little toe dip, and then it sort of went from there. And by the time by the time I was at Cork Buzz, I had really developed a love for Oregon wine. And there was actually, thinking of Claire Carver, who's such a delight. They did like a big Pinot in the City, and all the winemakers came to Cork Buzz after, and I got to know Claire pretty well too. But really what kind of sparked it was I decided I wanted to work a harvest in Oregon or somewhere, and I was drawn to Oregon just kind of because I was developing this really strong relationship to the wines, and I just enjoyed every Oregon wine that I had tasted. I was just stunned. Brian O'Donnell came to Cork Buzz. He grew up in Queens, so he travels to New York, the New York market pretty frequently anyways, but he has a strong connection to New York. And he had his little Belpont jacket on, sitting at the bar at Cork Buzz. And so I was like, hey, you from Oregon? So
That's smooth.
Yeah. So he and I started a relationship that is still really strong today, and Jill and him and his whole family, I just adore them. And so when Laura just said that she was like, you can have 3 weeks off to go work harvest, and she had done that in her past in Champaign, so she was so supportive. So I was like, Oregon, that's it. And Jason Lett had done so many tastings in New York at that time with older vintages, and he and Laura have a really strong relationship too. So I had this really amazing experience where I reached out to Jason and Brian. I was like, who can I work harvest with? And Brian said, you can come stay with me. And so I did like about 10-ish days with Brian, and then 10-ish days with Thomas at Anime. And when I was working harvest at Anime, I was staying at the Outcrop House on the Irie property, which was actually hilarious. It sounds really glamorous. It's a really beautiful house. I don't know if you've ever been in it. It has this like bathroom with this huge tiled tub that looks out over the, it looks, I guess it's north. I think it looks north right onto like the original vines. And the first night I stayed there, it lost power. And it was terrifying. It was so, it was dark, and it's this huge, it's like this, it's not a mansion, but it's a big house for one person. And I called Jason, and he's like, come on down to the winery, which was really great. So, but it was terrifying. It's very, I'm sure you guys, I'm a city girl. When you lose power
I am rolling on the inside right now. I've never heard that. That is hilarious.
I'm just and there was a noise. Like there was like a raccoon in the trash cans or something, and I was just like, get me out of here. It was like the quietest I've ever. It's like one of the quietest experiences of my life. So that was just amazing. I have very fond memories, especially of Belpont. I stayed at the neighbor's house, and they had a golf cart. And so at the end you'd work harvest, like at the end of the day, we'd go, like kind of go home, change, relax a little bit, and then dinner would be at Brian and Jill's every night. And it was these amazing dinners. He'd get into the cellar, Jill would make these just epic meals. And I would just like have this little golf cart, and it didn't have headlights. And so I had a flashlight that I had to hold around the windshield. And I would be driving through the vineyards. Fast. I'm a very aggressive driver. I'm a New England driver, for sure. And so I'm like, and then so I go, and then I get a little, we're just drinking some wine. And then I'm like trying to get back in the dark with this flashlight around the windshield.
I'm loving this so much right now.
It was fun. It was really fun.
That is a perfect Oregon wine story. That is Oregon. That's different than, not anywhere but Oregon.
I will say there were no public roads involved in this. This was through vineyards. This relatively safe.
Man, I swear to God, if a raccoon had jumped out onto your cart with you one of those nights, I would literally, if I could go back in time and pay someone $100 to make that happen, I would.
So, that's why Oregon, because so just like that, and then I went back to New York after that great experience, and that's where like something like the deep love of something just kind of gets into you. And my husband and I were really looking to leave New York. We just we had no idea how we were gonna have a family and like keep working. He was like a line cook in New York City. He has a much healthier lifestyle now. Let's say that was not. And so we were just like, we got, how are we gonna like grow up, I guess. And so Portland and Oregon just was, it was kind of a no-brainer, like where we're just like, so that's where we're gonna go. And so we just, and so much of that has to do with the wine industry. Like that's why, that's like why we're here. we were thinking of some other places, and I was like, but we like I want to be near the Willamette Valley. So I think it's also, and then a big part of it for me too is is IPNC as well. I just so when I was about to move I knew I was going to move to Oregon, and I got connected with some people, and I became a maitre d'. And so when I was still living in New York, and I came here and worked my first IPNC in 2013, and it was like, it really like sealed it for me. And I actually got a job offer when I was at IPNC, and so I like quit my job when I got home, and I was like living in Oregon 2 weeks later.
Yeah, well, that's similar to me.
Yeah. And so that just like felt really natural, and yeah, IPNC has been, Linfield is, love me some Linfield, love me some Pio. So a lot of good memories there too. But so yeah, it's just, there's a lot, it's just like all arrows pointed to Oregon and the Willamette Valley for me.
I like your story a lot because it's so IPNC, Oregon, worked harvest, and mine's not quite as romantic as that, but I just ended up around it and do love it.
I mean, it's a really special place. I mean, when you're out in the vineyards and the people are just, it's not unlike, it's a very singular community, I think, in terms of wine production. Just the feeling of winemakers and just
everyone asking to borrow each other's labeling machines, for better or worse.
And I love you hear winemakers say like that's not normal. Like a lot of wine regions, you can't, those, not to name anybody, like that is like the fact that the community here, it really resonates, I think, and translates to the wines too. I just think they're so, they're tasty.
They are, yeah, totally unique too.
Those are some excellent coming to Oregon stories. I am very appreciative to have those. For both of you, again, I'm sort of curious about coming to Oregon to sell wine. I mean, you're selling wine here in Oregon. Tell me about how it was, what the industry was like in terms of sales at that point. What were the consumers like? What was the education level of consumers like? What was the interest like of consumers as you were selling wine here? And how have you seen it change since you've been selling?
There's only one major change, and I was thinking, I should have prepped for a question like that, but I don't need to. To me, it stands out. There's one change. Unfortunately, I don't like it, but I do believe that we didn't have smartphones at all, let alone Instagram, when I started here. So it was very community driven. You'd have your restaurants that we'd all meet up at and hang out at. They'd let us stay after hours or use a tasting room, and we'd all hang out or hang out with the chef and drink and talk. It was very, very personal. I mean, that was the only way you could do it. And now we can all share so quickly on Instagram or something, and then someone will like make an ugly comment about, well, how do you like that? That wine's this or that, or they might say, I agree with you, but it doesn't feel personal to me, especially during COVID when we're not getting together so much at all. But that, to me, that's the number one difference. And I keep telling Stacey how grateful I am I would be afraid to run this shop alone right now at 50, because I do believe I might lose touch. And Stacey is at a one level age group wise like that is required to run this shop, and then we'll probably bring in staff who will stay with us for the next decades who will do the same, and who will be able to adapt and know what really needs to happen, because those are important tools. But I'll say I wouldn't trade it for the world, though. I really liked that personal way of just hanging out, tasting groups, meeting up for dinners, going to houses, and that was it. I might have left the original question, but that was it.
Oh, good.
All right.
And Stacey, when you were hired to come out here, what was your kind of initial job in Oregon?
I worked at Olympia Provisions. I was a manager. So I didn't get to do the wine list at the time, but I was trying to stay really engaged. So my first buying job was thanks to Erica Landon, patron saint.
Amazing.
So she was moving on from, she was running the Blue Hour Group restaurants, and so she recommended me for the job, and she really like shepherded me into that position. And that was really, that was awesome, because Clark Lewis had Oregon, it was Oregon and Italy, 23 Hoyt, all domestic. And then Blue Hour was this great, had a chance, like everything was divided by AVA. I mean, it was like one of the bigger lists, the closest fine dining list in Oregon that I've experienced, because in Portland, I mean, there's more, but it's not that common. It wasn't that common past times there, sadly. So that was my first kind of buying experience with Oregon, buying and selling. Although I didn't work the floor when I worked at those restaurants, which was a good experience, but I like the more personal communication with guests and customers. It's a lot more fun that way. So then I moved over to the Woodsman and was doing the list there, which was fun. Small but really fun, and I was really able to champion smaller producers that I was just so excited about. And then I came here, and yeah, so I love that people are, I guess, yeah, it's easy to lose the original question when you just start talking about random stuff, but I would say for me, seeing how, I think it's really cool to see how engaged tourists and locals are with, especially smaller producers, and then really distinctions and AVAs. I feel like people are going so much deeper over the years, and that's kind of a cool shift to see. And I think I guess I don't have too much comparison, especially to you, but I see some of our customers who are aging Oregon Pinot and Chard and then opening them and talking about like the way 20-year-old vintages are changing, and other people, and I guess Instagram is such an interesting aspect to that, because then people are able to communicate those deeper and quicker, and really talk about Oregon wine in the same way
Wider
that
audience.
you would, that we all used to talk about Burgundy, or you know, like really.
That's true. It certainly makes it relevant to the world, and then spreads out the supply even more.
Yeah, and it's great to see. Also, it's great to see celebrities. Like the Blazers, they like Instagram about Oregon wine all the time. You're like, that's so cool. Like, that's awesome.
Actually, I'm sort of curious about, because you spent a lot of time in retail before this shop. So I'm sort of curious about the sort of the changes you've seen in the retail game, and in Stacey's point about customers changing and the kind of deeper dive. Is that something you noticed as well? Did you notice customers who had deeper questions and more knowledge when they came to you than when you started?
I think so. Technically, no, but I think the way they ask it, because of getting a little information from Instagram or somewhere, then yes. And I'll back up in case it doesn't come up later in the interview, that I did switch to from distribution. It was in 2003 that I opened the first Market of Choice. Steve Johnson hired me to open the first Market of Choice in Portland, down on Terwilliger. It's a little tiny store that closed since then. But that I want to tell you and tell our viewers that I love the personal, what we're talking about, the personal aspect. So distribution was great because I was hanging out with winemakers and wine people and wine restaurateurs, which I would never trade back. But I remember thinking, even though I was doing well at that and really liked it, I just missed that retail aspect. My favorite job thus far had been that little shop I told you about, my third job, you know, where I just loved talking to people about wine, and we got so excited. So that opportunity came up, and took that job for 2 years, and then went to one of the more renowned, been around forever wine shops, kind of the stalwart old school shop in Portland for 11 years. And then had this wonderful opportunity to open the only full-scale wine shop in all of downtown Portland, which still blows my mind, but I'm glad for it because here we are. But as far as an international wine shop, we're the only one downtown. So that opportunity was glaring me in the face, so I joined a team of people to do that. And all that to say that was what I had to have, was that personal interaction. And it with customers is great because you become friends. Next thing you know, you're at each other's houses for dinner and getting to know each other and just having a great time all over again, sharing each other's different cellars and tastes. And so with that in mind, then to how are people, like I'm thinking about that, how Instagram gets people thinking they know, like they're not really into wine, like they're into a lot of things. Now everyone's into a lot of things a little bit. And so it takes a lot of hand holding and like finding out what they really mean, what are they really looking for. So that has changed. It used to be, people came to me at one of my old shops, they were kind of a wine person. They typically traveled the world a lot. They were like, I just got back from the Loire, and do you have any Somelier Champagny Rouge? And I'm like, yes, I have several. Thank you so much for asking. And it isn't like that now. So and I'm not going to say better or worse, but that was what I was used to. And I'm adapting now to, do you have orange wine? And that's the topic now. So it isn't a region or a history. And then we start telling them history and about, Georgia and the birthplace of wine since recorded history. They didn't even know. They're like, oh, wow. And so it's a different way of educating, learning, and tasting now. But it's a lot more 101 now. The typical wine drinker used to be maybe already a little bit more advanced, which might be why people thought wine was for snobs. And so now that's going away. That's the good news. Now people are like, I don't know, so tell me. So it's not, snobbery's going away. Or the people thought it was snobbery. A lot of times I don't think it was, but that's going away. So that's a good thing. Rambling.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think it's a good, what you're speaking to is like, for me, that customer that is older, possibly male, and who's like,
Maybe.
I want us some more Chauvigny. Like that is so far apart from my wine experience and from my my community, even with age. Gender, I guess, but and so I think it's so cool to know, especially the people in their 20s and 30s that I know that are like that they get excited when I work in wine and they're like, well, tell me about it. And I feel like the world of wine is becoming so much more accessible, and so you do get, I don't know if I have a point, but you do get like those people who, it is more 101 in a good way, because more people who don't know about wine are willing to walk into a wine shop.
My only fear is that you'll start investing a lot of time. We're very busy, excuse me. Sorry about that. So my fear is that a lot of 101 takes a lot of time and energy, which is great, except we all know that a lot of those people won't pursue that later. They heard about it, it's cool for a minute, and then maybe they'll move on to watches or something, which seems to be a thing that is a natural transition, or cars or something. And then I'm like, oh man, I need that time back. But then someone's going to come along who we take them under our wing and they are super into wine. And then they become not only a great customer, which is great for us, but a friend and someone to spend the rest of our wine drinking years together with. So it's just different. That's all.
You talked about the opportunity for Park Avenue. So tell us about the kind of the origin of this place and what brought you aboard.
So there was a team of people, a couple of investors, idea people who had a concept for this old historic space. The building's from the early 1900s. It's the old Calumet Hotel. It is registered historic. It's been fully retrofitted and fixed up over the years. It's really nice. And it was sitting empty from a huge, about a 12,000 square feet of space that was the Brasserie Montmartre, and it was here for decades and decades. And to this day, we have customers who had their high school prom, their 25th wedding anniversary, and everything in between here in the space. So we hear that a lot. Oh, this was the Brasserie. Indeed, it was. And then that, after 3 owners and 35 years, I think, that finally had its last moments. And so that closed down and the space was just vacant for a year and a half, which is not great for the landlord who has beautiful apartments above it and was looking to put something in. So we came to him with this concept for a wine shop. He loved it. And that's what we did. So we built out we took 2 of the 3 levels. We don't have the ballroom upstairs. We do have the basement level with member lounges, lockers, event space, cold storage, classroom, dinner room, all of that, and 2 kitchens. Well, 1 kitchen upstairs and downstairs, and then the beautiful wine bar in the front, which is our crowning jewel. The marble floor was like our major investment, and the 4-story neon sign out front also. But it's so beautiful to walk into the wine bar first and then look back, and we hear all the time, oh, I thought this was a little storefront, and they look back into this expanse of thousands of square feet of wine retail. And so that was the vision we had, and like I say, the building owner was like, absolutely, let's do that. And then we were very lucky to have Stacey join us as our bar manager a little bit later, after we got up and running and trying to get our feet under us and figure out our direction. And then it became evident very quickly to us partners that Stacey Gibson was partner material, to say the least. And so we asked her to join us as a partner here, and then that's the deal. We're the team, so we're the operating team here, and our goal was to be, we knew because we put ourselves in the middle of all the luxury hotels, including the new ones that are being built as we speak, that Oregon would be a main focus. And we have multiple Oregon clubs, monthly, quarterly, hard to find, things that aren't just the same old Pinot club or whatever. So clubs, Oregon wine, that's the big deal. That's the whole side of the store we're sitting in right now, along with Washington, California. And then my love, of course, I have to have Europe. And we have Southern Hemisphere, we have everything. We have the largest selection of vermouth, sherry, aperitivos. Those are all my personal favorite things. So we have a bazillion selections of those things as well. And shipping everywhere, we ship almost anywhere. So that we knew that this could be the wine center for all of that. Education was always at the forefront. Oregon was always at the forefront. And then I got to bring in crazy Italian digestivos and European wine because we have space to do it. So that's the deal.
Stacey, tell me about how you found the place and sort of your kind of initial entree here.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, I was the bar manager. I had been working at the Woodsman, and I was running the wine list, and the wine list it was great, but it wasn't I don't know if you guys know the Woodsman, the cocktail program there was just absolutely outstanding, and it was really more of a bourbon kind of focused place. So I started kind of feeling like I need to get back into wine, like to really have wine to be all about wine, not the accessory, but, and I got hooked up so my husband and I also have a wine and food catering company, and we were doing some pop-ups at the time. And so we have this space here, and so a mutual friend connected me with the guys here, and so we did a dinner. And right after that, like I had kind of been in the space, and I remember being like, that's it. Like that's what found it. Like
I forgot about the parallel event.
Yeah.
I totally forgot about that
so
part.
that's how like, and after being in the space and engaging, and then a week later we did the Brovia. I think it was Brovia or Joey cooked.
The
there was a
Brovia
Barola.
Piedmont dinner.
Yeah, there was so then Joey did pairings for
Forgot all that.
yeah,
wow,
a
it's been a
Barola.
long 4.5 years.
I think it was Brovia, but I can't remember. But
a
full Piedmont dinner, and so we were just like really engaged and got to know Neil, and so then I was like, y'all hiring? And so it was actually I only worked here one day a week for like 2 weeks. Maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and then the other bar manager moved on, and they were like, "Can you take over?
Please, can you do this?" Yeah.
So then I started running the bar for I think it was probably about 1.5 years or so, something like that, until until I became a partner, and which was a fun transition for me. I think it was kind of great. I love running programs, but there's so much more that I do now, which is really cool. And I mean, it's not a good thing, but since the pandemic, I've done more retail, which is a great kind of transition, even though bittersweet. I wish it didn't happen. But
it's been fun.
yeah, but it has been
sad
fun.
reason for it.
Yeah, but it has been fun, and it's great. I worked a little bit of retail in New York at Astor Wines, which is what I always use with Neil when we're talking about like our vision for this place and how we can just be a really great wine shop. I was always so inspired by Astor, how it's this huge wine shop. It's right in Lafayette, like right in Astor, right on 4th Lafayette. Anyways, and but they have geeky wines, and they have older wine. I mean, it's like a marquee wine shop, but without being too. It's discerning, you know, and I think that's something that we're always trying to figure out. How are we geeky? Like, we don't put something on our shelf that we don't believe in. But then we want to appeal to everybody. We want the selection to be vast. We want someone to come in and say, I heard about this, you know, small appellation. Do you have it? And we like want to have it. And so we're still kind of growing, or not kind of, we're very much growing and molding and figuring out like what our long-term vision is. We want to be here for decades. And it's important for us to kind of have that balance of a friendly wine shop that appeals to a lot of people, but also is all the wines we stand behind a lot. Like, we're very passionate about all of them. And I mean, not in a negative way, but we don't want to be your grocery store selection. Like that's not what we're looking for. We want to be a fine wine shop, but that's very accessible.
And just so happens that fine wines start at $12, so that works out fine. Stacy's headed up, that's one of the good things about the pandemic. Stacey headed up this wine club program that's insane. And she kept telling me, and I was like, how are you going to make that work? And her deal was literally, why would one of our customers or members or anyone pick up the wine at the supermarket when they're getting toilet paper and broccoli? Like, why are you going to buy this wine, that wine there for $16.79 or $18.79 or whatever, when they could have $15 wine from us delivered to their home, so they don't have to pick it up. So that's what I was like, well, that just sounds crazy. How would we even do that logistically? And now we have just started 4 successful monthly wine clubs where the bottles average $15 and it has free delivery to your house. It's like, I don't know how, she's a wizard, and it isn't like closeout junk either. Like we said, that's another thing I don't like about Instagram. There's a lot of, I'm not gonna name names, but you're scrolling, everyone's got a club now. And I'm like, I know what those selections are. Those are a closeout that even Trader Joe's rejected. And not everyone, I'm just saying they're out there. Or I'm like, never heard of them before. And it's some garbage wine and they make it sound like a great deal. And ours are very curated. I mean, tasted through, amazing values. That's starting to sound like a sales pitch, and that's not what we're here for. But I'm impressed with, this is why I'm glad she's with me, because I just didn't see how we could do that, and we're doing it. And so that's the idea, is our members now love it. They're like, wait, I don't understand. So you're gonna get me, $90 gets me 6 bottles to my house for free. And yes, don't go. So she just keeps saying, don't go to the grocery store for wine. And I was like, oh, okay. Because fine wine I had down, but I didn't know how we were going to do that.
Well,
because we're downtown. Not everyone's downtown all the time to buy anything.
Well, I also was, it really did, I mean, again, this is just a side thing, but I was amazed at, there was like one day I was like thinking of these clubs, I was putting like my proposal together, putting all my thoughts in one place. And then I was at Safeway and I was looking at the prices of the wine, assuming that they must be, $9.99. And I was looking at prices of wine and I was like, these are the same as our prices. Like most people are like grabbing wine off the shelf it's still $17, $18. And so, or more, and there's some like brand names that like marquee names that are flagship in grocery stores that they're like $30, which I almost didn't know, because I was like, we're trying to get people to buy fine wine from us, and it feels like always a price war, and trying to get people to understand like these quality wines. And I was just like, okay, we're gonna pick these wines that we've tasted, we stand behind, we know there's smaller producers or organic or just like made with thought and care, like that we are just like so passionate about. And sometimes local wine is a little prohibitive in the monthly clubs. Like we can't find a ton of values that we are super passionate about, but we can find them and we include them when we can. I know Twill did this red blend a few months ago, and it was at like the upper end of what we could make work with the club, but I was so jazzed to put it in there. And it, again, I mean, talk about people that you want to support,
So I have a kind of a follow-up question to that. You talked about sort of how you select wine and wineries and people you buy from, and you kind of talked about it a little bit, but I'm curious about the sort of the philosophy behind it. What do you find that more people are coming to you to try to get their wine in your shop, or that you're seeking people out whose wines you appreciate? And what is it you're looking for? What are the kind of stories that resonate with you and resonate with your customers when it comes to selling wines out of here?
I mean, we mostly have people come to us, but then we also, we do both. I don't know. I mean, I just think about like when I hear about a new winery, we will absolutely like send a cold email and be like, we heard about you, like what's your deal? And not currently, but back in the day, like I love going out to the valley. So if I heard about, if someone says, oh, I tried this one, like I will just like I'm happy to do it. Yeah, you're like, great, they have a tasting room, like let's check them out, let's meet some people. And worst thing that happens is you got to spend the day out in the valley. Right. So we definitely in normal times like try and get out there and meet people and engage. But often, people bring stuff to us or reach out to us, whether it's through relationships or just like cold email. I mean, we get that all the time too. And sometimes cold emails don't work, and sometimes they forge like really good long-term relationships. And then I think the way, like describing, I don't know if we have a succinct way that we describe our wines, because we get people come in and say, oh, do you have organic and biodynamic, or do you have natural wines here? And I think something we don't have down to like a one sentence answer is like, a lot of them are. A lot of our wines are family owned and operated, made with care and thought, but they're not certified anything. They're not, like.
And the ones that are certified are just in their geographical section, which I am. Can I just jump right in and go? I'm passionate about, again, to make sure, because those people may come around next, and so I don't want to make them feel bad or something. So my thinking is, I always tell people I can be quoted as saying one thing, and that's that if people are getting into wine, I'm like, do me a favor, do yourself a favor, do it with geography in mind. If you do it with geography and history, do it that way, and then you won't have to worry. And I always tell them it'll be easier for you, because if you had to learn all the grape names, it's going to be so hard. You might get tired of it. So do it as, pick a place you've traveled, or where do you want to travel, research that, do it as geography and history, and then just by default you end up finding, so say you're in Tuscany, my example, say you're in Tuscany, and you have everyone from the biggest corporate brand there, owned by Gallo. Gallo has a property there, at least one. And then you also have like absolute mom and pop. They wouldn't even have the money to buy new equipment or chemicals if they wanted to. So you have everything in between. So I think that's a great way to learn about it, is find out how wines are made and what the ones taste like that you like that are made that way. And then just start really shopping geographically, get to know the producer, rather than does it say organic or not, because so many producers say we make sure we don't certify even though we are. I mean, think about Drouin and Beaufrere. They've been biodynamic as long as Brickhouse or anyone else. They always were. Even Drouin here now, their property totally is biodynamic. So but they don't want to put that on their label, because they're going to get stuck in some biodynamic section at a natural food store, and no one's going to take them seriously or find the wine on the shelf because they're in the Oregon section. They didn't see it over there. And I tell you, I wouldn't. If I had a brand, I would not want to get certified. So people come here for expertise and guidance, so we can say, yes, we have them, I'll show you some. But I always want to make sure they know they're just mixed into the geographical place they belong. And typically the only wines we buy are sustainably, thoughtfully produced, often organically. And I like to point out, often by default, because like I say, these farmers haven't changed the way they were farming. So I always say they didn't get the memo on this new thing to use in the winery, these tricks. And so I'll often say you can go to the European side with a blindfold on and grab something, and it's probably not going to have anything in it that you're afraid of getting and putting in your body. And then on our Oregon section, even as we're speaking now, I'm looking over at the Cameron and the Troon, which is 100% biodynamic now. That brand's really taken off. And all of Jeff Veer's wines, we've got Cowhorn, and just looking across the way, that's just how they're made. So I see a light come on, and people are like, okay. So, and I'm like, you don't have to just pick from 4 of our wines or a small section. I can't think I could count on these fingers the producers we carry, because we kind of have to. We're right in the middle of Hotel Central, and I won't say the names, but there's certain brands that people just expect to grab a chilled bottle of out of the fridge and go back to the room with. Yeah, okay. That's not even the brand that's not who I was thinking of, actually. I'm thinking of something else. But I'm just thinking of the audience just being like. But it's easy here, and that's so I try to make them feel comfortable to shop the whole store, and then if they want to know specifics, we can help answer that.
Oh well, we're also business. We have to
get
it, but you have to balance that. I mean, you can't sacrifice your values just because you need to make money. That would be. And to the consumers, I would. Yes, true. And to the consumers, I would encourage to, if you're new in the hobby and you're real excited about this new topic of natural wine or whatever it is, to do a lot of your own research and then go in and perhaps be understanding that the new excited and passion that there may not be staff always available to spend an hour, 2 hours, just like having camaraderie about.
that exciting new topic. So, but we always want to give attention and time as much as we can, so to help someone find the perfect bottle of wine that they're looking for their occasion or tasting group or consuming, whatever it is.
I feel like we could talk about this for a long time.
Oh, yeah. This is like, yeah. But we're all excited. I think I did that though. Hang out. When I did that at Radio Shack when I was a kid growing up, they just got to know me by name. I would just hang out there all day.
I bet they were so
everything, just checking it all out, learning about capacitors. That's fun. It is fun.
Mm-hmm.
Have you found that obviously Park Avenue itself fairly new still, but in your kind of time selling wine, have you found that customers' expectations of those kinds of things have changed? Are more people asking organic, biodynamic, natural, sustainable, whatever word you want to use? Are you finding that more people are coming in looking for that specifically?
I don't know that more.
I think people
It's
just
popular.
more want a story. Like they want to know
the story and experience. We talk about that all the time.
Which is something I know I personally connect more. I like organic and biodynamic wines. But I think it's more about like who's making them. Is this that there's a person who has connection to the land that the grapes are coming from. I think people are much more drawn to that than the specific words. Like we don't get a ton of people who say. It happens. It definitely does. But I think they're more interested in the story behind the wine. And
I agree.
Yeah. I think it's the best way to sell. Certainly with Oregon wine, where we have great stories with so many of these producers. But all the wines, we say, we either revisited them or we just know, like, this is, fifth generation or something. Like, it is like knowing that who's making the wine has a connection to their product. Is something that's important to us, and then something that I think is really important to consumers. Like they want to, I think just like the way people are attracted to farmers markets and farmers, I think people are starting to get that that wine is an agricultural product that is made by someone's hand, and like connecting with that a lot.
I love what you just said. That's the first that I've heard that you say that, and I agree completely with that. And for all of us, and that's, that's it. You nailed it. The farmers market is a good example, and farmers markets, it always strikes me as odd, but they cost more. I know why, but they cost more than a supermarket, but people are willing to pay for that. Even in organic food at a supermarket, it's the most expensive outlet, but there's a reason why we do it. And we get that fresh baked bread from that vendor, and we get the asparagus or the whatever's in season. And that's how people are buying these wines for sure, is let's hear your story, let's hear about it. And that's why I was gonna say, that's why I think Oregon wine, by necessity, it often is more expensive than European wine because they haven't owned the land forever. Their own family doesn't pick the grapes. I know we're friends with almost every one of these winemakers, and none of them, I can't think of any of them that are rich and rolling around in a brand new crazy car. It's a total labor of love. They're probably barely scraping by most of the time, and I get it. The overhead is crazy for a newer winery, but talk about passion. Those people have passion, and that's where I think people are willing to pay this, I see 44 and 59 and 36, but that's not out of line for that experience and the quality.
So you mentioned that with this space, you have the opportunity to do a lot of different things. So I want to have a couple specific questions about some of the things you offer here and sort of how they came about and the perceptions of them. So I'll start with the legacy pours. Tell me about the idea behind that and how that's gone so far.
Yeah. Oh God, I missed that. I'm like, that was, so I kind of came in, that had just started when I took over the bar, I think. But the great thing about that is, so many times people just buy a bottle, you buy a bottle, you open it at home. And so to just give a few more details, so we had these pours that were a lower markup. So we would take older wines or just higher end wines, hopefully with at least a little bit of age on it. And then the markup, it was basic, not quite, but a little bit like if you just took the bottle price and kind of divided it in 5. A little bit more because you got to make a little bit, there's some extra costs of labor and argon and all these things. So they're a pretty good deal. And it was a 2-ounce pours or 5-ounce pours. And it was really cool to see people come in and be able to experience wine that, I can't, these are wines I couldn't drink all the time, we had just, there were just some great wines that we would put on there. I mean, one time we put, I think it was Lafitte. One time we had older Iries, like 20-year-old Irie wines.
And we often run the Tondonia wines, rosé, and old reds.
And that's true. It didn't even have to be really old, but we had the Lopez de Heredia rosé. That's a good example. It's hard to find. You can't, and we didn't get a lot for the shelf.
Yeah, we got like 3 bottles, so we might as well pour it.
So being able to let people, if everyone gets 2 ounces, 12 people got to taste something that they never would have tasted. So for us, it's funny because it almost, I sometimes would worry that it made us look like fancy, but to me actually felt like really kind of like bringing fine wine like to the people, and making it more accessible, which I think is just so cool. I mean, there's just some even and it wasn't always old. It would be great to do it old, but we put like Radicon on there, and people weren't a 500 ml of Radicon is like $45, and it's a weird wine, and it's so to be able to get someone to taste 2 ounces of it and be like, oh, cool, and then they don't have to make the commitment of the full bottle. It was so cool, and especially, I mean, for me, you have to taste every bottle. You got to proof it.
It's the right thing
It's the right thing. But you do, and then my staff, they have to taste it because someone's going to ask, hey, what's the difference between, sometimes we would get 2 different vintages of the same thing, and someone would say, what's the difference? And you have to be able to speak to it. And so it was really great, and I can't wait to start that again.
I'm glad you said. I was going to point out we're talking past tense a lot because of COVID right now. It's
Just
coming back.
Because of COVID.
And I love that what it brings. But what I love about the Legacy Pours is, like Stacey was saying, we didn't want to just look too fancy, but that's not at all what happened. We have all the master sommeliers that come to town when they're in town, all the sommelier tests that happen, and the people that come to town for that. We are the destination, and people line up at the bar, and they absolutely love it, and it's so much fun. And then next thing you know, they are buying bottles, because we were also doing just retail plus $10 corkage, and so just champagnes that would be $300 at a restaurant, but is like $110 here or whatever, and then just open and drink. So it became, no one thought it was snobby. Everyone's like, this is awesome. We can drink great wine and afford to do it. And then, winemakers and all. Joel Peterson was at one time, and all the winemakers from the valley. People love coming here to get, and then a lot of high rollers will come in and drink 2 or 5 ounces of white Burgundy that is on some old Joe Bard or something that seems expensive to me, but they're like, oh my gosh, I love it. A glass of Joe Bard Merceau, so it's fun. The Legacy Pours are really special.
Yeah.
And you mentioned obviously food as well here. Tell me about the sort of the food again during normal non-COVID times, the sort of food aspect of the place here, and also the education part of it here. Tell me about kind of how you've kind of wrapped those things into the Park Avenue experience.
You want to talk food? I'll talk education.
Sure.
Okay.
So we have this amazing space, and what we were doing is we were working with a really amazing chef, Carl Hall, who was renting the kitchen. He has his own business called Spetzel and Spec, which is awesome. And then we were working with him to have the wine bar food that was really fun. It was great to kind of, because especially we're not a full service restaurant, so to have this really wonderful food experience to go along with wine, it was, that's for us, that's it. Food and wine together are just, it's just
that's the point.
That's the point. I don't even but so it's always been really important to us, and we've done a lot of wine dinners, and we did this amazing wine dinner with the Corazon del Sol one, where we integrated education we made it like a seminar / dinner, which is one of the few times we did that, and it actually worked really well. And so we did, can you remember the full menu? It was
Argentine-inspired beef.
Yes. And so then it was and then it had a pesto, but then there wasn't that an empanada to
there
start.
was, yep.
And it was so fun. And that to us is to introduce customers to really good wine, and then be like, this is it in context, that is education and hospitality rolled into one. We're really looking forward to, COVID has derailed a lot of plans and things. So Carl's moving on, and he's gonna kind of do some really great things. So we do get to start from scratch with the wine bar, which I'm really excited about. And so we don't have solid plans right now, but we have a lot of ideas in our heads.
We do.
That we're not going to put out loud because they're just our like exciting little ideas right now. But we are.
But we will be able to call from places we've been and experiences in tasting bars. I think of winery tasting rooms. I think of restaurants with wine programs and tasting. It's exciting.
Yeah. So. Again, you got to deal with what was dealt, so you know everything is interrupted. But with that, we're trying to be really positive, and I think finding a way to express ourselves through what's paired with the wine, we're pretty excited about it, and to kind of find a way to execute that is going to be a challenge. But I think we'll figure it out, and I can't wait to. Again, continue creating context for our customers and having them understand wine, because I love sipping wine alone, but you know, when you put it with something, it elevates the food and the wine together.
And speaking of elevating food and wine together, events has always been a big thing. We do have the space. It's funny, you would think we have like a massive dining hall, but we don't. We have a table that seats 12 comfortably, 14. And then if we like put a couple side tables, we can get up to 17 or 18 in what we call the brass room downstairs, an homage to the old brasserie Montmartre. There was a very striking, gigantic gilded mirror painted brasserie Montmartre that stood behind the bar, which is now our retail counter, that whole time. So we dedicated that to fit perfectly in that room. We have a sort of a little chandelier and everything down there. So that's the brass room. And that's where we have very well attended classes, wine classes. So far we've only done pretty much one-on-one level, but cover the whole world. People love that. And then we've done a lot of winemaker dinners. A couple of our favorites, I gotta say the Irie, well, we've done two or three events now with Jason Lett, and that the Irie dinner is memorable. So many though, even a wonderful Silver Oak dinner, and that's, you don't think of like, we're up in Oregon, but the Silver Oak dinner, so well attended, champagne dinners. Actually the most fun, I think one summer we did 3 champagne and fried chicken dinners, which oversold. We had to like we ended up doing it up here on this floor and like putting tables everywhere. And it was so much fun because we did like some grower champagnes, and we did like big name Krug, and we had the famous fried chicken chefs in town, Doug Adams and Maya Lovelace and Cody Auger from Nimblefish did Karagi, and they did like their own takes on them with gold foil and plate, and then we had champagne and fried chicken, all you can eat, and it was like, so I'm excited again I'm excited thinking about reopening and just doing stuff like that. But people really ask for classes the most. That's the thing people are into. So I'm looking forward to more education. And like I say, we do have the space to do it. It's not like you would think we would in 8,500 square feet, because everything's broken into rooms and sections, but it ends up being intimate by default, and people like that as well. And we have a membership program, a couple of them. So 40 of our members, 42 technically, have a little locker, a little cubby hole downstairs in a member lounge, and then they get to also rent that room for their own events and things, and a lot of them just use it for wine tastings. So it's just wine everything around here when it's wide open, and that's organized and otherwise. So looking forward to all of that again. I don't even know what it'll all look like yet because we're so busy. Stacey and I are, we do have a little bit of help right now, but since COVID, we've been working mostly by ourselves. And so we're very busy, and once we hear things that is safe to do so, we're going to start planning all of that. But classes is what I keep, even yesterday, talking to someone about the wine I sent up, this going up courier to her today, delivering to her today. And she was like, I just love the way you're speaking about the wine. Do you have classes? And I'm like, okay, soon, hang tight.
On that note, when you are doing classes, what are the things you're trying to get across to your audience? What are the things you think are most important for like a 101 level wine class from a tasting perspective? What are the kind of key points you hit?
For me, it's always geography and history again, and whoever the guest is or whatever we're studying. What
Well,
do
yeah,
you
I mean,
think?
geography, history for me, like taste, even on the most basic level, tasting wine where you know, the learning the vocabulary, especially if you go into a wine shop or a wine bar, dry versus sweet, what high and low tannin is, high and low acid, even to be able to have build on your personal wine vocabulary, since it's so hard even for wine professionals to convey what we're trying to say when we taste wine. So that's really important for me for Wine 101. It's so confusing, and some people, if no one's ever told you what a tannin is, people come in and they just don't, they'll say smooth or, or what's I don't know, smooth or crisp, and they don't know they're trying to say maybe low tannin or high acid, and so that's an important thing for someone getting to know wine, to translate the words they use into how they can communicate, especially at a wine shop, go to a wine bar, and so they can keep learning about wine too, so that they're not intimidated. That's always important.
That's my favorite part in general about wine, is having someone use words that the fun is trying to figure out what they actually mean, regardless of what they're saying, without them knowing that they're wrong. But then the result of that is that they're like, I came in here afraid to speak, and now I feel confident to come here. That happens all the time. So they'll say, I like a wine you can stand a knife up in, and I just a big tannic wine like this brand or whatever, like certain blah blah brand, and I'll be like, okay, there's no tannin in that wine, so I think I know what they mean, and then I'll figure it out. I seem to be good at it, because 2.5 decades later, people are like, we have the same palate, exactly. And I'm like, we do not, but but I know what you like, and I figured it out. And then you help them feel confident, and I'll be like, well, here's, by the way, remember these words, so if you go to another wine shop, I'll give you a couple words to use, and I think you'll be successful. And they're always very happy with that. Get return customers that way, for sure. And just make people happy, which is kind of the idea.
Well, it's obviously come up during this interview already, but obviously we talked about COVID, and so you mentioned a couple of things about the way you've responded to it here. I'm curious about sort of your recollection of how it affected your business to start, how you decided what you needed to do to pivot, and you've talked about what you're looking forward to, fried chicken and champagne, but what you're looking forward to as you come out, and maybe some adjustments you've made during COVID that you're anticipating keeping around.
That's a great question.
Yeah, well, I mean, the big thing that we were psyched to do is we redid our website within the first month, and that was we had to, and it took a lot of our labor time. In that moment we weren't focusing on sales as much, but it obviously was more of a long-term vision on that. And so we switched our POS system, and so visually the shop is, the website is a lot better. And something that is quite technical, but I know most business owners would really appreciate, is inventory management is just like the thing. It's like get me going on inventory management, and I'll talk about it for a long time, but it's very, we have so many different, especially when we had the bar, you have people across the country who could be buying something on your website while you're opening it for someone on a shelf, and then, or off the shelf in the bar. And so you really need to connect all these things, and that's way harder. It's easier said than done. And so we redid this website, and the inventory management aspect of it is so tight now. And it really it streamlined delivery, shipping, and pickup. And that was the big one, like curbside. We always had a website, but it was just a little different. Now people who are just like, they can go online, they can buy something and say pick up curbside, and then they're like, blue Honda Accord, and then they can just like drive up, not instantaneously, but but and so that was major, and something that we kind of had those structures already in place, right, but they streamlined, this new system streamlined it.
I was going to say, that's what's going to stay is, again, we are downtown, we're parking, once things are fully reopened, parking can be tough, we know that. Good time to mention that is so Portland, and I am the same way. This is so Portland to be like, what? Where is that? When it's like a block away. I'm from cities of sprawl, Jacksonville, Houston, Charlotte, and so I'm like, it's literally a 60-second walk away. But there is a smart park that we validate for, literally 45 seconds by foot from here. So so there's that. But we will keep with all of the website is, like Stacey's saying, curbside, here's where I'm driving, whatever. They can even like be just stop in the street usually, and we can load in their car. So that and the delivery and shipping we've always done. Everyone knows it now, and we're just going to keep rolling with that big time too. But we love to have people come in, of course. Smart Park's good for like when the bars reopen. It's wonderful to have Smart Park right there, and they've redone it. It's super nice now and all that. Actually, everything that's being built now down here is very nice. They're coming along quickly on the new Ritz-Carlton property right catty corner from us with rental, living, retail, everything's still happening. Thank God. I was concerned about that, but it is. So
We even got some great new customers out of some of the construction workers.
Yeah, construction workers who like wine. It's been awesome.
It's great.
Oh, and I'd say something else that the COVID has forced us to think about is just that whole conversation of convenience for people to get their wine, and that's where the clubs come in. But we've been talking with a partner out in large partner out in Beaverton to have a potential annex on Saturdays, and like a 4-hour mini shop or a pickup window or something like that for all of their employees, thousands of employees, and they're in it. So we're doing a lot of talk like that, just how to get wine to people. Because people, they're out there and they have money for wine, they like wine, and we're going to be that shop for them.
Yeah,
I mean, I understand. We are.
We always talked about that's why we started the clubs. Like, it is convenient to get wine at the grocery store, of course, and we want people to be able to get good wine in the most convenient way for them. That's our goal. And I know in my personal life, supporting small business is really important, and grocery stores have done quite well in COVID, and small businesses, not just ours with wine, but all small businesses really need love. And when you support a small business, you make a massive impact in your community, way more than if you support a corporation. So I encourage everyone to support small businesses.
like I always say, there's no small local vendor who crafts toilet paper and sells it, or I'd buy it from them. Right? But so go to Fred Meyer or wherever for that. We all do. And then I talked about toilet paper on an interview that'll be forever saved twice. Paper towels, but that's the place to go get those. And it's just a shame to have to get wine there. So that's what came out of this for us, was expansion that we always wanted to do but didn't think we'd have the time to do. So I know for me the wine clubs have been a really good outlet, because without the bar, it's been my creative outlet, so it's been pretty fun.
So on that note, what are you looking for in the future for the next 5-10 years for Park Avenue?
Hiring employees so we get a break.
so we can just get one little break.
If it weren't for lattes and Girl Scout cookies, we would be arch enemies right now.
Those Samoas did not last.
I know.
That was not good. Or my daughter, it'd be nice to not have her, to hear her every day say, "Are you going to work today, Mama?" Yeah.
So for real restaffing, okay, but long term, I think more of the same, and
I think executing the things that we've been dreaming about are what we're really excited about.
We're not going to be stagnant. We're in we can't afford to be stagnant in this space. We're going to grow.
So I think with the relaunch of the bar, and integrating pairings and how we can do classes and dinners, and just I'd like to keep doing what we were doing, but just better and more. How about that?
We've learned a lot. Sometimes I say that we're guilty. I feel guilty how much good came out of being forced to stop and slow down. COVID is so terrible. It's so terrible. There's no way to put words to it. And we're so lucky to be able to survive by just shedding all the fat and doing what we have to do, and working very hard. But it was almost necessary for something to happen to get us to learn what we need to do. And our interactions with our clients has never been stronger. So now we know what they want, we know what to do, and it's just more of the same. plus the bar, which is going to be so cool. It's going to be weird to have like bar noise and music again when I'm like trying to take a call to,
We're so used
order
to it.
wine.
I mean, for like a good 3 or 4 months, we didn't even have, we had the door locked, and it was just the two of us stuck in here together.
Lots of lattes.
And so if people wanted to pick up, so we did deliveries, if people wanted to pick up, like they would have to knock, or we would bring it curbside. So, and then I think in August, we started letting people in to shop in small groups, like only a couple people. So that's it's a funny experience. And so it'll be nice to have, you're right, bar noise and just like people.
I'm going to
here.
be so irritated. It's going to be epic.
He's going to be like, why is someone talking to me? Yeah, it's interesting. It will be interesting. But yeah, it'll be nice. It'll be nice to have that vivaciousness back.
This space needs it, and it always has had it. When this was a restaurant and a jazz bar, I mean, about 36 inches behind where you're sitting, Rich, was where Paul Revere and the Raiders played. So that's like a thing. This place like has it in its soul, in its bones, and we're ready for it to be vivacious again. Yeah.
Especially for you, Neil, this is what are the biggest changes you've seen in the Oregon wine industry since you've been here and since you've been since you've been sort of familiar with Oregon wine? What are the changes into the wines and to the people that you've seen from the producer side, and what do you see happening next for both of you? What do you see happening next in the Oregon wine industry?
I see. Well, the change I saw since I got to Oregon first, and I know you'll agree, but I'll get right to it, is that the main thing I've seen change is that there's, of course, a lot more brands now versus a lot more wineries. So a lot of our friends, a lot of sommeliers, a lot of people who often have full-time jobs have branched off to start their own brand where they're sourcing fruit. And so it does make it tougher to keep up with the new hundreds and hundreds of new labels. And they're not always great. Sometimes they're experimental and fun, and sometimes they're better than others. But that's the main change, because when I came here, there were 147 or something like that wineries, and those were the brands. That was it. So you could kind of get your head around it, and everyone could speak to it and talk about it. Go visit the wineries. And now it's very different. So if someone wants to go out to what's that awesome wine that Saul makes? What's his brand?
Championship bottle.
Yeah, Championship bottle. I always say Silicon Sapphire is the one that I love so much. I keep wanting to say that. But Championship bottle, there's no winery to visit, but we do want to promote those wines. And so it's just different like that. We have to talk about brands now or labels or whatever. And you can't say wineries anymore. And some of them have rented wineries or micro wineries. So that's like literally the number one difference. The other thing is, I would say one difference that I'm really liking, and this is where our Discover Oregon Club comes in, is Discover Oregon is a quarterly club. It's all about not Pinot, not Chard, not Gamay. It's not we're known for Burgundy grapes. Everyone's got that down by now. We're world renowned for it, for good reason. But what about the Gare Noir Swiss grape that Jeff Vera makes, and what about the Dolcettos and like crazy wines and Silicon Sapphires, a Friuli white blend, like those? I'm excited. I got reinvigorated about Oregon wine all over, where I'm taking home Oregon wine now instead of like knowing about it but taking home a French wine. I'm taking home Oregon wine again because it's crazy exciting right now, and that to me. Oh, everyone's outside the box. What Brianne Day did this year with her 2020 vintage, with everyone had all this problem with smoke taint and so much trouble. So she made that one called Lemonade, for obvious reasons. It's white Pinot Noir. What a fun twist, and that wine's delicious. So I think that's what's fun, is what the newest generation of winemakers are doing that are different now that there's an established set of what Willamette Valley's known for. Pinot Gris, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Gamay. Gamay's hot. But the others, that's to me the big change. And the fact that it's not always a winery, which is frustrating for tourists. But
what about for the future of Oregon wine? What do you guys see coming next?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's so interesting how many grapes are getting explored that are outside, as you were mentioning.
Mondoos.
I mean, but to see that it's great. I mean, it's awesome. So it's not like, it's kind of challenging that like, well, this is our climate and this is what we grow well, even though we do grow it very well. It's pretty fun. It kind of feels like we're like figuring ourselves out a little bit, even though without, disparaging
new
our
take.
Pinot heritage.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome to see how creative people are getting, without being too experimental. But yeah, and just as vineyards get older and
That I was just thinking that because you
yeah.
can't expand much more. So the age of vines is making a difference now. I mean, even some of Cameron's wines resolve before 20 years now because of age of vines. He told me that this time. I was like, why does it not taste horrible upon release and better in 20 years anymore? He goes, because of the age of the vines. It's like they can, I forget exactly what he said, but the Arley's Leap vines in
Yeah.
particular, they're just so good. And I think that's going to be something that we can speak to that now, where France always was. Old vine this, old vine that, and now we have 35 and 40-year-old vines in the Willamette Valley, and of course down south, there are vines planted in the 1880s, and so that are still in production. So, well, the vineyards anyway.
And like the gorge, there's so many cool things happening in the gorge.
Yeah, actually, that's hot now.
Yeah, and so really exploring other areas beyond the Willamette Valley and beyond Southern Oregon. It's pretty cool. I think there's a lot of excitement, and there's a lot of talent. And I think people are, there's a lot of good stuff.
So both of you described your kind of interesting routes into the industry. I'm curious if someone were to come to you, and someone probably has come to you and asked for like words of wisdom on joining the Oregon wine industry. What would you tell someone who was just getting started?
I mean,
Market saturation.
yeah. Well, just to get to, we've talked so much about how it's community, and I think like get to know the people, because it speaks so much to the industry, and I guess that's any industry. You just need to create relationships. But it feels like that, creating relationships then lends itself to learning what new vineyards are happening or what, it all kind of ties in together. But that's so important, and to understand the history too, and how it ties in with the present. I mean, it's cool to see someone like Irie and with Jason, like it's one of the, you get to say like the first of Linfield, but then what he's doing now is still amazing and absolutely relevant, and he's still pushing himself too.
He's both, because what we're currently running in the most recent club, we had his Chasse Lastore, another Swiss grape, how funny, with the funniest back label. If anyone gets a hold of that, read the back label. Anyway, that's a great example. He actually, what a great, the first in the, I always say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, first and the best. The Irie Vineyards, I'm a big fan. So, but what he's doing now with his father's legacy is the old wines taste exactly the same as they did, and then his new wines are new and exciting. They are those new crazy labels and those grapes we didn't know were being grown here. That I'm excited thinking about it. That's the excitement.
But it makes me think about, all the new producers. They still have, even all the winemaker, I think about the young winemakers who they're all making their wine they have these, the generation before them, they're making the wine at their spaces, or that's where they get their grape contacts from. And so everybody, you have to kind of understand everything that's going on. You can't just be like, well, I just want to taste the cool. You can't just focus on what's happening now. It's all. I mean, like any wine region, though, you have to respect the history and you have to know the classics. Like they're benchmarks for a reason, because year by year they endure, and so you have to understand that. I think that's really important. It's not, you can't just dismiss the older wines.
Oh, that would be such a shame in Oregon.
Yeah.
Our history is so unique and rich here.
So I think that's an important part of understanding the Oregon wine industry and getting into it. Oh,
were you asking about?
What we were talking about?
So we were talking about what would you advise somebody? We talked about it as if going to make wine. Did you also want to talk about
I meant learning about, I meant like if you're going to work on the floor in retail, it's the same thing too. An approach. Or if you, I didn't mean just winemaking. I meant like if you're learning about it, or if you wanted to work at, restaurant or a retail shop, like you have to know it all and connect with everybody.
Connections are the Oregon way. I guess probably any small industry, but definitely like we know the people who sell corks and people who sell barrels. So, you just ask people, and people know people, and put people in touch with each other. And I mean, connections is how I have ever gotten a job. And so that's the way to do it, yeah.
All right. Well, that's actually all the questions that I do have for you. Is there anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything we didn't cover here that we should have covered?
Anything else you want us to battle about? We'll find something.
I'm just trying to think if there's something we're going to be like.
That was.
I can't if I start now this week, and this week is brutal too. There's a lot this week.
Morning start.
So I can't. I did think about it. I was like, I couldn't possibly make it through the day.
Should do a toast later for sure. Yeah.
No, I don't.
I think,
I
you
mean-
know, the other thing I think that we're excited about that we haven't mentioned, that we have talked about before is we're starting to do Park Avenue cuvées with winemakers.
Oh,
and
right.
that's something that is
Saw that.
like, we had talked about it for a long time. And basically this summer we kind of sat down and I was like, well, what are 3 things we want to accomplish in the next month, like right now? And that was one of them. And we're like, let's do it. And our very first one was with 100 Sons. And
It's epic.
I mean, it is so good, and it was such a wonderful working experience with them, and their wines are, our customers have just from all over the country have been like, this is awesome. Like, can I get more? And we're like, no, it's gone,
I want to quote Grant real quick. My quotable quote from that day when we did all of our blending. We tried this and that barrel, a third of this, 2/3 of that, and we ended up on this really perfect, this very perfect blend that I knew. I was like, this is the one. I had already written in my notebook, this will be the one, I think. And he smelled it and raised with his glasses, and raised his hands in the air and said, "This is Oregon." And I was like, that's the one, and I agree. And it was his own wine, but we had blended it a way he hadn't blended yet, and he was just like. He was blown away. We were all blown away, and that's the wine we picked. And so, then they were so generous. They let us 1/3 of that is something they only had a single barrel of. That I joked, can we just get that barrel? And he's like, absolutely not. But he did let us use it. It's so good.
And it's so good. And it was great. We had known them, but we didn't have a strong relationship with them. And now I'm like,
yeah,
they are great people, and I'm very much looking forward to working with them in the future. And we did a Gamay with Martin Woods, and we're doing a Chardonnay with Martin Woods. And I think for us, it just creates. I mean, like going and barrel tasting with winemakers is just something that's just so. It's just such a special experience, and to find those blends and to put it together, and then to feel collaborative with them too, is something that means so much to us. And we were pretty giddy, especially when we got the first proof for the label for the 100 Sons. We were like,
label was tight.
oh my God.
All their labels are, but we collaborated. It's pretty awesome.
And it looks really cool. And it's a fun, we get to have fun. And, I mean, they would have done something else with that juice. But it's still, I think, kind of that collaboration is really great.
Yeah, and that they're not private labels on a wine they made. We go out and make it with them, and that's a blend they aren't even doing on their own.
Yeah.
Which is something I have a lot of experience with, and that's why I wanted to, when Stacey said name 3 things right now that we're not doing that we want to do, I was like, make cuvées. That's what we need to do.
And so we're looking forward to how we can continue that with them and other winemakers. And I mean, for us, it's about creating a great experience for our customers, and then just strengthening our relationships with winemakers. I mean, when you go out and barrel taste with Evan, and we got to hang out and like have dinner afterwards, and it's just that some of that is just again talking about why we're even in wine. I mean, that's it. Like, is sharing a meal, sharing good bottles, getting excited, and having conversation, and I mean, it's just like I couldn't think of anything more like perfect.
That's the reason to do it.
Yeah, and so we get to do that for work.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the cuvées. That's important to us. That's part of the growth.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you both so much for your time today, for your hospitality, for your stories. I had a great time, even with some fun interruptions. And we'll go ahead and let you guys off the hook.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was great.